turn this over to you and make you the host. All right, Sherry, you are good to go.
All right. I'm still not getting any control options over here on my end, Nicole.
Okay.
I may have to have you just advance the screen for me.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
Let me test it out real quick to make sure I can go back and forth. Yeah, I guess it is still keeping me as the host, so we'll work with it.
Okay. All right, so the first question here, if you want to use the chat box, and just let me know, how many of you have actually heard of the repository? I call it the repository, the Extension Master Gardener Resource Repository, the Extension Master Gardener Coordinator Resources. Any of you heard of that? Go ahead and type that into the chat box. Okay, hey Terry, hey Lisa, a few of you have. Okay, all right, Catherine has not. Oh, well, this is exciting, a few of you have. Okay, well, if you'll go ahead and flip to the next one. I want to give you an overview about this resource. The shortcut, the tiny URL to the Coordinators Resource Repository is there on the screen, tinyurl.com/EMG-COORD. This is also findable, searchable by Google. We've moved it to a Google site, so if you, in desperation, and I've been there, I have been challenged to find the spot myself, just Google it, and you can find it from the Extension Master Gardener Coordinators. You can just say Coordinators Repository. Go ahead. So this is a resource that is just for you. It's an online site. As I said, we moved it to a Google site. This project began we're in our third year now, began in 2015, and it was the outcome of some work at a previous Extension Master Gardener Coordinator Conference. So in 2012, the Extension Master Gardener Coordinators got together in Spokane, Washington, and identified some things that our program needed. One of them was a mission and standards effort. So a task force was put together to create a mission and a standard for Extension Master Gardener programs. And the next resource, the next piece that came out of that was, where do we get the resources to do our job? Sometimes we don't have time to recreate something, reinvent the wheel. How can we, keep in touch with those best management practices or those resources that are maybe in refereed journals, just really good, helpful materials. So Gail Langoletto from Oregon State was the initial leadership on this project, but we formed a team, got together, started working on this, and put together this online site. And it's about you all as coordinators. We're trying to put resources at your fingertips, easy to find. Go ahead. So we've got a bunch of different categories, things that you would find on the site. These resource categories correspond to tabs on the site: program planning, engaging and teaching adults, everything from conflict management to social media resources. And we just recently added a tab. It's not so much a refereed resource, but so many of the conversations that are popping up on our coordinators listserv, we wanted to archive those and catch those and put those somewhere. There are lots of very helpful tidbits in those discussions, and so those actually will also be considered a resource category. Okay, so you could find refereed journals or other types of articles, readings, if you will. There are, in some cases, PowerPoint files, and isn't that nice when you can find a presentation someone else has already developed and you can just put that right into service for yourself. And there are also lots of templates, things that maybe were created for one state or one local situation and that are modifiable and easily adapted and applied to other situations. So you'll find different types of content on the site. Go ahead. We have certain resources that we think are just fantastic. When our reviewers score the resources, they come back with scores of 90 or above in all three of those categories. I'll talk about those categories here in a second. But when they get those top scores, those resources are identified as stellar, and they get that purple arrow next to them in the margin. So you know that that's a really good resource and one worth considering. Okay. We also have some resources for new coordinators, so folks that may be new to the Extension Master Gardener program or new to those volunteer management responsibilities, and you would look for the green arrows, and these are resources that reviewers found particularly helpful in that early stage, those new days. Go ahead. I gave some suggestions here, some resources I've found particularly interested. This one is moving forward with founders. I think we've probably all encountered that situation where we've had volunteers that have been with the program in that local area for a long time, and maybe had different ideas or were recruited under different expectations, and maybe there's a change in staff or a change in situation, and we need to change. Change is can be very painful for us. So this resource, it has an article that was published in Journal of Extension, but also it's a presentation, and this can be very helpful to you in getting some ideas of how to work with those folks. Go ahead. Some other pieces, understanding generational differences in volunteers. These two articles are included on our resource repository, and they also give some insight for working with people in different age groups, different ways to appeal to and work with folks from different generations. So an important consideration, one that we'll be exploring even more in depth in August at the Coordinators Conference, but something that's in particular importance to our volunteer program. But just an example of some of the resources you can find online at our repository. Go ahead. So if you want to know more about the site itself and what we did to get there and its history, you can read the article in Journal of Extension that is about this repository. So again, when Gail first started this, we were first initially working on this, we documented it, and of course documenting our program history is important. So you can find a lot of stuff in there, including some early feedback, some early evaluation feedback, because just as I asked you, had you heard of it, if I had asked you this question 2 years ago, there would have been a lot more no's on this chat box response than there are today. This is pretty encouraging to see so many people that have heard of the site and are familiar with it. So again, if you're interested, you can read a little bit more about the history of the site. Go ahead. So again, I mentioned Gail's initial survey response. The site was originally created on eXtension, and it was difficult. It was challenging to find. We couldn't remember the site to it. Couldn't find it when we searched for it. So that's why we moved it over to a Google site to make it a little easier to find. And of course, we have a tiny URL which helps that as well. Go ahead. So, in order for resources to be available to coordinators through the repository, they need to be reviewed. They need to go through a review process. And go ahead. We have a process to do that, and I mentioned scores earlier. Each of the resources included on the site has a score in 3 different categories: usefulness, transferability, and basis in research. So first of all, we ask when we're reviewing a resource or considering it for posting, we want to know that it is nationally applicable. And if it's not written from a national perspective or immediately applicable, then it's pretty obvious. It really has great potential to be adapted for us across the country for nationwide use. So we want to give our resource a usefulness score. Next, we want to look at transferability. So, how easy is it to apply? Do we have enough information there that if somebody picks up that resource, they can easily apply it to his or her local program? And then the third score is the basis in research. Again, we wanted to have this repository full of credible resources. Extension is all about research-based information. So does this resource have that research backing? Or on the flip side of that, we encounter a lot of best management practices or best practices among volunteer managers, and as such, this resource really should have a good score there. So we take all 3 of those scores, and remember earlier our stellar resources would get a 90 or higher in all 3 of these categories, and to get that purple recognition, that stellar designation. So we do pay attention to those scores, and if we get resources nominated that are too low, we simply won't put them on the resource. We'll say thank you, but no thank you. All right, go ahead. So I'm going to petition you. You should know that you can't come to a webinar without being asked to do something. I want you to consider being a reviewer, a content reviewer for our resource repository. And if you were to be a reviewer, you would consider each resource that came to you with a form that's as simple as this. We actually use this form. This is the paper version of an online Qualtrics tool. The online tool makes it easy for you and for me to get those numbers and that feedback from you. But you go through and you evaluate the resource, and you can see on the bottom here this sliding scale. You just basically give the item a score. This is the usefulness, and then there's one for transferability, and then one for basis in research. So to be a reviewer is pretty easy, and it's an opportunity that really looks great on your resume. Go ahead. We don't overload you. We don't overwork you. I mentioned that the site began in 2015, and here it is, 2018. We've been slowly working on this. We talked a lot about it in 2016 at our coordinators conference, and just in transitioning leadership for it. And so we're headed into a period of time where we're really looking for new resources to review. And I've gotten some really great items that are sitting here on my desk that need to be reviewed. So I'm looking for reviewers, and it's not a huge commitment. We ask you to look at 2 to 3 resources annually, and maybe you'll spend about an hour per resource, including the reading time. So if it's a article, obviously it'll take a little more time to process through than, say, a template or a PowerPoint that might need to go through, might need to be explored. So we ask you to do 2 to 3 resources. Once again, I use an online survey tool to collect your review information, your scores, and once you finish that obligation, you don't have to do any more. You certainly can if you want to, but that's the minimum ask that we have, is 2 to 3 resources. And then we recognize you on the repository, on the site, as a reviewer, and also I follow up with communications, recognizing that we all have different requirements for promotion and professional recognition. So if you've submitted a resource or authored a resource that is recognized as a stellar resource, we have certificates to recognize that. But we also have letters of appreciation for our reviewers, and mainly just to give you that documentable role as a reviewer for this national resource. All right, go ahead. So to be a reviewer, it's very, very easy. On our site, on that front page, that initial front page, there were 3 buttons at the bottom, and one of those was to be a reviewer. And you just click on that button, and you get this online form, and you enter your information, and that comes to me as the site editor, and I will follow up with you with resources to review. So it's very easy to sign up. John says over here in the comments, having served as a reviewer, he agrees it is easy and not that time consuming, and time well spent. Thank you, John, for adding that. So yes, we will be seeking out reviewers. You can do this anytime. You can go on there today. You can go on there this afternoon and nominate yourself as a peer reviewer. And as I said, I'm working through a stack of resources that I'll be sending back out to a review team here shortly. All right, go ahead, next. So maybe you're not interested in being a reviewer, but you're interested in, you have some sources, some resources that you think other coordinators could benefit from. So I'll tell you how to nominate those. Go ahead. We do it right through that site. So again, another one of those buttons on the front page says to nominate a resource, and it goes right to one of these easy to fill out online forms, and you fill that out and you tell us about the resource that you find particularly useful. It's helpful if it's online and there's a URL that can go with it, or if you need to mail it or something like that, then you have to give us enough information to contact you and get a copy of it to put it out for review. But preferably that we would have that available electronically. But you all are out there. You're the practitioners. You've got the boots on the ground. You have resources that you use, things that you've borrowed from other people. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, as the saying goes. So anything that you find useful, nominate it. The worst we could say is, hey, we've already got 3 of these things, and it's the same as another one, so thank you, but we've got this covered. Or, you know, maybe you've got a unique spin on something a little bit different that can help another coordinator. So it's worth nominating. It's not difficult, pretty simple process. Okay, go ahead. So we do need some resources. Go ahead. Through some various meetings that we've had with coordinators, we've had opportunity to explore this. In 2016, at the Extension Master Gardener Coordinator meetings in Montana, we did have a session. We spent some time practicing the review process and actually going through identifying resources that coordinators needed. And these are kind of some of the top responses through our ranking process. So we're looking for pieces that support strategic planning or showing behavior change. It gets into that impact and evaluation work that we'll be talking about next month. Leadership training for Master Gardener volunteers, coordinator handbooks, and volunteer retention. Those are some top resources that were identified as needed. So if this is, you know, ringing some bells, giving you some ideas, you know, some resources that you think could help in those categories, please do consider sharing them and nominating them through the website. Okay, go ahead. And again, last summer at the International Master Gardener Conference at the coordinators meeting, John was on hand and took a lot of notes and came up with these kind of top categories: program planning, again, communicating impact, development and retention of master gardeners, recruitment, diversity, and conflict management. All of those, you know, are on the list multiple times. So again, some resources that you as Extension Master Gardener coordinators have identified that we need. Okay, go ahead. So it's easy to become a reviewer, easy to take a look at resources, easy to nominate resources and kind of share what works for you and what you found to be useful. And we have some future directions for the site. Go ahead. So these new topics that coordinators have indicated are priorities and needs for them. So we've got new topics, new resources to be added, but we also need a leadership team for this site. Go ahead. You can certainly be involved as a reviewer. You can certainly nominate content. We need people that are familiar with Google Sites to be a part of our leadership teams, to provide that site support, kind of behind the scenes sort of thing. And we also need that leadership team in place to provide continuity for our resource repository. So Gail started it. She's handed it over to me. I will be looking for a team that will help us bring a more systematic approach to the coordinators repository, have those windows of time where documents get submitted, things get reviewed, get pushed back out, get promoted, things updated, older content reviewed, and a process for the leadership team to turn over, to be shared by others, and to continue to be that resource that we all need access to. So those are ways to be involved, and would love to have any of you, if you're interested in it, go ahead. I think I've got another slide. If you're interested in that leadership team, yes, there is as well a tab, a button on the resource repository site where you can nominate yourself or nominate someone else for that matter, but to sign up to be a part of that leadership team and bring your energy and vision and leadership to the project. We would greatly appreciate that. I can't tell you what kind of time commitment that the leadership team would be. Not much. I probably spend 3 to 4 hours a month on the project at the current stage. So it's not a demanding project, but something that we can all benefit from. Go ahead. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I want to ask in the chat box, now that you've heard a little bit more about the repository, I want to know if you plan to check it out, look for a resource, or maybe even nominate or be a reviewer. Thank you, Nicole, her enthusiastic yes. I hope that you all will do that. Any questions, anything you want to throw in the chat box there real quick? Okay, just don't forget, if you're checking out the site and it occurs to you you have something that could be really useful, really helpful, please by all means nominate it. Don't worry about nominating something that maybe you've created or authored yourself. That is just fine.
Sherry, this is Nicole. I wanted to tell you thank you, and we appreciate your leadership with this repository and taking the lead to get all of this organized. I know that's a lot of work. But for the people who said that they have used the repository, I was wondering if you could either let us know or put in the chat box what you have found useful.
That's a great question. Hey, Robin.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, I know I recently looked through it. I just discovered the site, and I found a couple of articles that I thought were pretty helpful to me. One was the 12 best practices for engaging baby boomers, but many of those practices would relate to any age volunteer. I also found one that I thought was great, and it was diversifying the volunteer base, Latinos and volunteerism, and how do you make efforts to reach diverse volunteers, and what do we need to do as coordinators to engage those audiences, what challenges there might be, how we can do a better job. That was a very helpful article to me. And then for the brand new coordinators, there are some evaluation tools. And so there was a survey from Washington State University Extension that talked about different questions you could ask after you've taught the Master Gardener training course, or after a period of time when your volunteers have been in their role. You could actually use this survey, modify it a little bit, and adapt it to your particular needs. And I like the way they broke it down. They broke the survey down into natural resources and environmental stewardship. They had information on improved health and wellness of residents through volunteering, which is something that I'm very interested in, personal skills and attitudes, and even economic impact. And so that was something that I think I'm going to adapt just here for my program.
Washington State has quite a few resources on the repository, Nicole, that are just really outstanding. When Tony Fitzgerald was the state coordinator there a few years ago, she has since retired, but she had some really great PowerPoints that are good at addressing program development, working with volunteers. She had a great generational presentation as well. So just outstanding resources. And I'll add also, I know that sometimes I forget. I'm just so used to using the things that I use. I forget that other people, may find our tools very useful and very helpful. So I have to say again, don't forget to share, even, things that you may have used for a long time. If you find them effective, good tools, good resources and references, by all means, nominate them.
So Sherry, I have a question. Do you think having some of those, the PowerPoint tutorials, the narrated presentations, do you think that those would be appropriate for even coordinators to share with advisory committee members or Master Gardener volunteers that are in leadership positions?
Absolutely. I know here in Georgia, it's entirely appropriate to use other extension resources from other states, with the exception, of course, of pesticide recommendations. So generally, those resources made in another state are wonderful for just being able to use it right away, and then certainly to use it with those advisory audiences or those Master Gardener leaders. Yeah, there's a very widely useful application.
And I just wanted to comment that if you go through the repository, you'll notice that there's some areas where there's gaps in information. That's obviously where Sherry and the team could use more resources. But I also wanted to say you may find some interesting documents that will be useful to you. And one that I stumbled on was from Oregon State University, and it's a project application. And are you familiar with this particular document?
Actually, I have a couple more sitting here in the review pile. They're wonderful.
Right. So every one of us that's a coordinator has been in the position where you get wonderful ideas, but they haven't necessarily been vetted or thought through. And this application has some basic guidelines to make sure that a volunteer's project or idea relates to the mission of the organization, but it actually asks them to complete the application and put in writing their thought process, the long-term impacts, maybe thinks about the costs involved with the program. And I'm not really sure yet if I would use this, but it did get me thinking that this could be something to sort of put it back on a volunteer to give a little bit more thought to it and then to present a full idea. So I liked this application that was available on the repository.
And we do have a project proposal form that we use here in Georgia. I haven't submitted it. It's not part of the repository, but just to elaborate on that process, it is something that master gardeners can flesh out that idea. It's the first step in project development. Use that project proposal form, and then it goes up for discussion and ultimately approval by the extension agent or the program coordinator. So project proposals are fantastic, and I've seen a couple of states. Again, I've got several resources here that have been submitted for review, but a couple of states will use a project proposal form that's more an internal version, and then one that's it comes from the community. So if there's someone in the community has approached extension or approached master gardeners to conduct an event or make a presentation or do a project or something like that, there's also a form for that. So it's up to you. You can look at those different, those would be what we call best practices, or maybe a template that would help you develop a resource for your state, and you could look at the various versions of it used across the country and combine the pieces that work the best for you.
I see it as an opportunity to take the project proposal and share that with my advisory committee, which is made up of many Master Gardener volunteers. But then even though, coordinators make the ultimate decision about projects and what the volunteers work on, this could be an opportunity to get weigh-in from an advisory committee and then have more of a concerted effort when you're planning, discussing, and implementing ideas. And so
yes.
We don't have a board in my county, but we do have an excellent advisory committee, and so I could see you getting them involved with the application process more than they are now.
Yes. We also found, I was an extension agent in Virginia prior to coming here to Georgia, and we used a proposal form there as well, a project form. And it was a fantastic conversation to discuss what projects were proposed, what the interest was. It really helped us calculate realistic goals based on the number of active volunteers that we had, so that we didn't overcommit. And as long as we had priorities in place for each year, that gave us a framework to make that decision, because you'll get so many requests and so many fantastic ideas for projects, and you can't do them all. There's just not enough time or energy to do all of those. So that proposal process really helps flesh out those ideas, make sure that you've got what you need, including enough volunteer energy, and to make that decision.
Do we have any other questions or comments about the online repository, becoming a reviewer, or submitting documents or materials to the group for review? Okay, well, hearing none, we will conclude the webinar. I appreciate everyone tuning in today. If you have any questions, you may contact Sherry or myself. I will send out the link to the current schedule for 2017. Remember that we have an open forum in December, but we could replace that with a presentation if anyone is interested. And also, if you have any volunteers or non-faculty staff that are interested in listening to these webinars, please email me and I can send you the directions on how to get them set up through extension.org. Okay, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Sherry.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next month, third Wednesday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.